Maybe. There it goes. Hello, everyone. I am Cassandra Quinn, and I am the owner and founder of Quinnovate, and I'm super excited to be here with my friend Nicole and colleague who I have had the pleasure of working with for the last couple of years now, I think. Yeah,
about 2 years now.
Almost 2 years. But the reason that we are having this conversation is that I realized that I'm often having conversations with brilliant minds like Nicole's, and they say wonderful things. I'm like, the world needs to hear this. And then we don't make that happen. We don't turn on a camera. So I asked some folks who I thought had wonderful things to say that the world needed to hear, including Nicole, if they would be willing to have those same kind of conversations like we always do and turn on a camera. And that's why we're here. So that without stealing any of Nicole's thunder, I will stop there. Nicole, who are you? What do you do in the world? What lights you up?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, my name's Nicole Aquila, she, her. I live in Nashville. I met Cassandra at a great event in Arizona 2 years ago. A mutual friend introduced, said, you need to meet, as we were running out the door, and it was magic from there. So I live in Nashville with my fiance, who's also Nicole, and 2 boys who play hockey. I have a business called Thrive Differently, and it's really about helping people showcase their stories as individual founders and CEOs and build movements through their stories in multiple ways, whether it be how they communicate, marketing, their website, their operations, and just kind of, that's it. Just showing people what it looks like to, make an impact in this world through your business.
I love it. And I think that one of the things that drew us together pretty immediately was a lot of things, but one of the things was, I think, just both of our commitments to like authentic, genuine connection and communication, and how core that is to our values and the way that we run our businesses. So I just felt that instant connection with you as soon as we met. And I'm just curious, like, how has that shown up in your work? Like, is it something that you've had to consciously think about as you've built your business of like authentic communication and connection? Or is it something that's just innately natural to who you are in the world? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so thanks. That's a great question. I think it is something that is pretty natural for me. I don't think it's natural for everyone. It's just one of those things is that I always look to have a conversation with someone. But I also could say that depending on the nature of the situation, I can kind of turn it on or turn it off. So I think one thing is that, I love when I'm in conferences and I'm meeting new people. I might be very social, but sometimes at like school activities or things for my kids, I kind of can hide a little bit. So I think it just depends on the nature of it. But, to me, everything starts with a conversation, but also just really listening and asking questions. And I love to ask what questions because they don't have any type of judgment, and it really helps to learn about the other, and then look for either commonalities or things that you want to learn more about. And that's kind of how you create connection. So I think that's how it shows up for me, but how does it show up for you?
I think I love that you said that it's something that you can turn on and off. I think that there's something about that like in and of itself is authentic. I wanted to just name that, like where you recognize the importance of being authentically connected and dialed in. And when you are not able to show up in that way, you just dial it back and it's not present. You kind of have that I call it my city blinders on, like I'm there to do a task or do a thing, whatever it is. And so my head's down to the work. But in terms of how it shows up for me, I think that it's connected to my process brain. So to me, all things are process, even communication. And so I don't think that I realized that early in life. It was just something that I saw how things connected and how the dots all lined up in order to have those kind of relationships. But I wouldn't say, in some ways, I wouldn't say it comes naturally. Like in some ways, I would say with the ADHD, like is stereotypical for a lot of ADHD girls. I was diagnosed late, so I wasn't diagnosed until adulthood, so I didn't have that framework to understand myself. My hyperactivity showed up verbally, so I was chatty and talkative as opposed to hyperactive physically. And uh, I think that with that came this like maybe double edge where I learned to communicate well in some ways and had some really blind spots relationally because of the ADHD. And I had a hard time connecting and making friends, I think, especially early on. So part of the way that it shows up for me is learned behavior because I went to college and got a degree in sociology. And then my other degree is in theater performance. And both of those are, I just say I have 2 degrees in studying people, right? And then I have a minor in psychology. So I just studied people a lot. So that's a really
Yeah.
long-winded answer to say, I think the process pieces of it came more naturally to me, and not being verbally shy came naturally, but some of the other pieces had to be learned. But that's what I think is fun, is I think that people take for granted and think it's either innate or like you just can't, it's not a learned behavior, that either you're good at it or you're not. And I don't believe that. I think that if people desire to connect and communicate more effectively and authentically, it can be a learned skill. So
No, I definitely agree. I think it was interesting too how you had talked about having ADHD. Is I also have ADHD and was also, like many women, diagnosed much later in life. But mine actually showed up physically. So I was an athlete, and I guess, in some ways it kind of hid some of the the traits of ADHD because I was playing soccer all the time. But I think that, to me too, is that learning, I think sport allowed me to learn communication in a different way from a really early age, because, I was constantly having to communicate with my teammates and my coaches. And I think that, just having that, whether, looking now as an adult, but looking at what the power of sport has given to my children as well, it's like, it does help to set you up for, how to communicate, especially in competitive environments. And I think in business, things can feel competitive, even though maybe it's not always looked at the most healthy way.
yeah. I think you and I have definitely had private conversations about wanting to be a part of that paradigm shift of like zero sum approach to business to 360 wins. And how are we creating a world that it's not, they have to lose in order for me to win. But I also think that like there's still forms of healthy competition like you're talking about. And I think that like that's really fascinating. That makes sense to me, that sports journey did all of those things. Like it masked some of the things that might have helped you otherwise get diagnosed sooner. It gave you some accommodations and tools that you may have not otherwise gotten, and like taught some of those skills. And I know that that's shown up time and time again in our work together, because I understand how important it is to create visual representation of communication, and that's not my gift. And you are able to take all of my words and ideas distill it down to something that someone else can actually understand and get. And like I've said to you, probably more times than I can count privately, but I will say it again for the world to hear. Like, I have not met anyone quite like you who understand and is most closely aligned with how my brain works and functions. So it's just been so good to work with you and become friends with you, and see how our gifts are complementary. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they really are just like, yeah, I couldn't create a visual to save my life. Like,
Yes, you can, but I agree. And I think that also comes back to what you're saying about, showing up authentically, and authentically both communicating and listening, right? If I understand your strengths and you understand mine, then we can create real synergy. But it's when I'm trying to put you into a certain type of box that would fit, then it's not going to work. And I think that's how you ultimately elevate people. And how you do that is through listening and asking those questions of, what does support look like? How does your brain work? You have to actually figure some of those things out. And I think sometimes, we're so into trying to sell, our services, that we forget it's not really that. It's actually making a genuine connection with someone and understanding if it's going to be, some sort of relationship that's going to mutually benefit. And I think that's what I respect most about you, is that you do take time to really, understand your clients, and you take time to create these really amazing spaces that are both business, but also, have personal, because, our businesses are part of our lives. And if you don't understand what makes, if someone doesn't understand what makes you tick from an emotional family friend situation, then why are we doing this? I mean, I think we align with that, and you do a really great job of, it never starts out with a business sprint. It's always how are you? Tell me what's going on. So yeah, it's pretty great.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that that's part of what inspired me to do this particular series. Over the years, I developed our framework for what I call spherical listening, because I realized that like the breath it takes to communicate, there are the two parts, right? The breath in is the listening, and the breath out is the communicating the words that we're saying. And I think a lot of times when people think about effective communication, they're so focused on what am I going to say? What are the words that are going to come out of my mouth to be an effective communicator, right? How do I get my message across? And I think that sometimes it's lost in translation how it often begins with how well you listen, and how well, and you've said it several times already, how well you ask questions, like and really honing your ability to ask high quality questions and then really tune in to listen. And I think that given what's going on in the world and in our country, like there's just such a need for deep, authentic listening. And I think so often people are listening to respond, or secondly, listening to learn, right? Those are kind of the two primary ways that people tune in. And as I've worked with my clients over the years, especially when I've been working with these heart-centered, mission-led business owners and founders who sometimes have some baggage or resistance to things like selling or promoting themselves and or leading their teams or hiring, all of these places that leadership and listening come up, right? That teaching them how to listen in those different ways and to challenge how their brains process and tune into the conversations has made such a difference. And I thought, you know what? I haven't done any kind of training, like especially public training on spherical listening in years. And I was like, I should pull that out of the vault and offer that to the world. So I decided to do a couple of free workshops, which I think I told you about when I invited you to do our coffee chat. But on Thursday this week and Monday, I'm doing a free spherical listening workshop for people who are interested in honing those different skills. For those who are interested, you can go to quinnovate360.com/listen, and that'll take you to the places that you can sign up for those. But regardless of people coming to workshops, regardless of any of that, it really for me was, how do we bring this more to our awareness and bring it to our consciousness about how we are listening to one another. So like when you think about, you said earlier, and I want to go back to it, you like to ask what questions because there isn't judgment. Tell me more about that, because I don't know if you've ever said that to me in that way. So I'm genuinely like, this is one of those moments that I would have leaned in and asked this question whether there was a camera on or not.
No, I love it. Yeah, I don't know where I've figured this out. But I started to think about, so yeah, I think about listening all the time. In fact, there's a quote that is in my head always, and it's listen as intently as you want to be heard. And again, don't know who says that, but I read that quote, and it's in my mind all the time. And then also just thinking about mental health and just how you could literally make somebody's day just through a conversation. And so it's something I think about multiple times a day, especially when I'm out in public. But the what thing is that, if you think about, if I said, Cassandra, how are you planning to run this session? You might be like, well, okay, what do you mean how? It's just a weird word if you think about it, because it's like I'm asking you to give me the actions in which you're going to perform.
Yeah.
Now, if I said, what are some really great ways that we can have a discussion? It's the same type of question, but now it's coming from a place of excitement, non-judgment, and allowing you to flow, right? Yeah. Or if I said, when is this going to air? It's like there's a sense of urgency. Or if I said, what are the different places that this will eventually air? It just, and now again, there's more things to it than just a what versus when versus how and all those. It's also the intonation of your voice. So
Yeah,
as
for
you
sure.
kind of heard, I do it, like I said, a lot of it is subconsciously. I don't know that I'm doing it,
Yeah.
but I think it's so practiced at this point, because I'm so used to the way that I've trained myself to speak, to have really deep conversations. So it is in not just the way that you form your words, but in the intonations that you have, the type of words that you use. You can tell if it's my personality versus your personality, but I love to start with what. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I'm stealing that. I'm adding that to that practical tip to my toolbox, because I do think that sometimes, especially if I'm not being careful, I will ask a lot of how questions, because again, process. I'm like, I want to see how it all fits together, right? And that can feel really judgmental. Oh no, you froze. I'm not sure if it's me or you.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go. You're back. I don't know. Here we are. So I was saying that I sometimes can ask a lot of how questions if I'm not being careful, because again, I am trying to figure out the how, the pieces of the puzzle, but that can feel really judgmental, or that I'm questioning. And that's something I've talked about with multiple people across so many different settings of like, I think that goes with and I'm going to interrupt myself, it goes along with the neurospiciness too, though. Like people who are, ADHD or autistic or any of the other like anxiety or I'm not sure if this goes with like Tourette syndrome. I know that that's under the umbrella of neurodivergence, but I don't know if it's
High
connected.
sensitivity. Yeah,
High
there's tons of
sensitivity.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So a lot of times for neurodivergent brains, we just need more explanation and crave more information and how. And I think that our society has been conditioned to see questions as a threat, or how questions as a questioning of authority. And so I really love, I'm going to see if I can start asking process based questions without the how. Like, I want to see if I can get to them with the what.
I
That's
think
a
you could do
fun.
it. I think
Yeah.
it's, and sometimes I catch myself, right? Like I'll just say something like how, and I'm like, because I think too is like when, in the work that we do and the amazing people that we meet, because we have a lot of impact driven clients, we're in some modalities that are really about being conscious, not just in our businesses, but conscious within ourselves. And so I can also sometimes tune into how am I feeling when I'm asking a question? Am I feeling like I'm coming from a judgment place? And sometimes I'll catch myself and be like, okay, reframe. And usually if I can reframe into what, now this works for me. It may not work for everyone, but I'd be very interested to see how it works for you.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And that connects to, I think that you just hit one of the spherical listening options. So, like, as I'm training people on the different aspects or ways that you can come at listening, one of those options is challenging assumptions. And so, first of all, you have to be conscious of your own assumptions, though. It's really difficult to do this unless you are not in practice, or if you're not in the practice of challenging that. But when you catch yourself judging, uh, and or drawing conclusions before you talk to a person, thinking about what questions might I ask that would get to almost like verifying or validate. What's the word I'm looking for? You're like checking to see if that's true. I can't think of the
Yeah,
word.
yeah,
There's a better word
validation,
than
yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Confirmation.
Yeah. And also the work I like to do when I'm preparing for an important conversation, if it's the kind of important conversation that I had time to prep for, is already challenging my assumptions by thinking about what if that was not true? What is possible if the opposite was true, or some other, what could have led to this outcome, or whatever it is, right? But then how do you ask the questions to not make people feel challenged or that they are in trouble or whatever? You're just trying to understand information. One of the tools I like to use sometimes when I'm trying to make sure that people know I'm just looking for information is pre-framing it with no wrong answer. No wrong answer, question. That lets them know, like, but you got to mean it, or that's really dangerous and can like really harm trust, right? Sometimes I don't catch ahead of time that someone's going to feel like there's a right answer, or they're panicked and they're like scrambling. And so when I see that scramble, then I'll tack it on and be like, no wrong answer. But I'm curious if you have any other tools that like help, maybe not even just like, my brain has 15 different directions, things I want to learn from you. I'm going to go this direction because I think that we're talking a lot about questions, but like once you ask those what questions, like what have you found works for you in your active listening? Like what helps you really tune in and listen to the answer?
For me, I think it's when I start to like see the heart show, like having some sort of emotional attachment, because it's like, again, it's that trust thing. And like once you can start to see someone talk about, whether it be something that is new, they haven't said something like this before, or they're talking about people that they care about on their team, or or something that, even that hurt them. Like, to me, that's when I look for, okay, because there's an opportunity in those where if I allow that, I first of all have to show that I'm hearing them, right? So there's different words that you can affirm. You can affirm people through your words, but then there's also that if you allow people to be on this island and start to share, how long do you allow that to happen before you share something and you build that mutual trust? And I think that's, sometimes that's a difficult thing for, consultants and, people who work like us, where we are coming in as, fractional consultants, really helping, businesses grow in our own different brilliant ways. But I think it's, I love to do almost all of my sessions with my clients before we enter into any type of agreement starts with a story session, and it's a 3-hour interview. And I ask them questions about themselves, and it gets pretty deep. And it's not that all of it is going to be used for, whether it be creating a brand story or a brand personality or to use on the website. It's also about understanding their businesses and understanding what drove them. Where did they come up with this amazing idea? What created momentum? What held them back? Because the more I can understand those things, the further we're going to be able to, get. But I have to also understand that in them sharing that, it can feel really lonely when you're sharing a story, especially because, I'm asking questions for basically 3 hours, but I do find times to relate back to them, or be like, wow, I heard that, or maybe I can't relate to you, but that feeling that you felt, I know I felt that in this situation. So it's not that you have to say you have the same experiences, but I think also relating back to when people are sharing something, and because the emotion part is really big for me, as soon as you feel that, relating into emotion through your own story or through an own anecdote that you can add to the conversation.
Yeah, no, I think that immediately like fired towards a couple of other like elements of the spherical listening. One of them you said was opportunity, listening for opportunity, which I sometimes will call possibility. Like, and I think that that's one of your gifts, right? Is that you are in tune with possibility for people in such a beautiful way. It's one of the things I love about you. Like you have a way of reflecting people's abilities and superpowers back to them in ways that they don't even necessarily they don't communicate that way about themselves. And so you see these opportunities, and or I think that both in our relationship personally and then in our relationship to our shared clients, being able to understand people's visions. I think that that's one of the things you and I have in common is that and now I feel a little self-conscious because I'm about to claim.
No, of course. I mean, I'm
Uh,
tearing up too. Like, you're not alone in this, my
oh
friend.
my God. But one of the things I think that you and I have in common is that we do have a gift for understanding visionaries' visions in ways that a lot of people don't get them. And so even when they've tried to explain their vision to other people, either people don't get it or they don't understand it or they're not fully bought in, or that person, the visionary, hasn't been able to articulate it in a way yet that other people can understand and connect to it. And I think that that's one of our shared gifts, is being able to see that vision and see what's possible for them and help them be able to go on that journey to be able to create that change they want to see in the world. So I think that that's something that I really admire about you, and why I trust to bring you in to work with my visionary clients. It's so
Well,
cool.
no, well, I mean, same. I mean, and just the fact that we can, I mean, I think that's one of the best things. Like, how many people have business connections where we've, can share tears of gratitude or tears of frustration. We've done all of them, right? We've had, and I think that's the thing, is like when you, kind of what we've built separately, but yet together, is like showing people like this is how collaboration works. We do a lot of similar things, but it's not competition, it's uplifting, right? It's yeah, there are things that, and knowing each other's strengths, because there are things that you do that like blow me away, and I'm like, holy mackerel, like I don't even know how you think like that. Like, your process driven brain, and the way that your clients just have these beautifully built from A to Z frameworks to get through their journeys. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And the team that you have behind you also, that you built and support, and that are amazing humans. I think one of the things I love is that you don't just speak the game, you are the game. You show up the way you want others to show up. And I think having, whether it be your own personal team or the fact that you do bring in others behind you, I mean, to me it's a testament, because I think a lot of times people are very territorial over their clients.
Mm.
And the fact that we have worked on multiple clients together over the years, and it's like that immediate trust. Like, how could you, if you don't have that relationship with the person who's bringing them to you, right? And I think that's just kind of the magic of you, is that when they fall in love with Cassandra, they fall in love with everybody in her realm.
Oh, I appreciate that. I think that I'm grateful that I have taken the time. I don't know if it is something, I haven't taken the time to necessarily assess if it's more of a natural skill or a honed skill, or maybe a little column A, column B, but I do really pride myself in being good at finding the right people for my team, whether that is an employee or a contractor, or a strategic partner in this case, that I'm able to bring in, and match that properly. But I also think that it comes from, like you said, that mutual trust, which goes again back to how you listen and how you authentically communicate and connect, right? I think it's funny. Like I was thinking, there's a couple times that have come up in this conversation already that have reminded me about the places where you and I have let our overexcitement get in the way of like always having like best practices in business. Like, we know better. We teach other people. We come in and clean that up for other people. And then you and I, like, something about our energy together, we allowed some of that to, how do I say, like, we skipped steps, I guess is the best way to say it. Like, right. And we knew better, and we even named it when it was happening. And we're just like, we're so excited to work together. And I think that because of the trust that we built through our communication, though, is why we were able to withstand that and backtrack and go, okay, we knew better. Now what? Now how do we clean this up, and how do we make sure that everybody, our clients are taken care of, we're taken care of. Like, so I just really appreciate that, even when we weren't perfect at it, right? I think that that was the point I was trying to make, is that I don't want this conversation to sound like we've got it all figured out and we always do
Oh,
it
no, no,
perfectly.
no, no. Yeah, no, no, no.
I wonder, like, are there times that, like, is there any particular time that comes to mind that you would feel comfortable like sharing, where you reflect and you go, I wish I had done it differently, especially when it comes to like connection and communication, listening?
Yeah, I think, for sure there are times where I'm like, I wish I would have done it differently, because sometimes I think for me personally, what I can say is that I'm so into communicating and listening that I also sometimes I don't have my own voice, right? Because I'm so quick to ask the questions. And, when you leave a conversation, you're like, I didn't say a single thing. I just asked, and it's not,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's not like, oh man, like, oh, I didn't assert myself there. Sometimes, like, maybe they're not genuinely interested, and that's okay. And I wouldn't be upset about that. But I also think about, are there times where maybe I could have spoken up? And I think for me, it's not even just like speaking up, but I think it's also having those boundaries of like being too nice or being too accommodating, with whether it be my time, my words, my energy. I think both you and I can share that we're overachievers and we want to go, we run through walls for people. And most of the people we work with really appreciate that. But I can say for myself, sometimes it hasn't been appreciated, it's been expected. And I think that's where you have to draw the line, is when is it expected versus when is it appreciated?
Yeah.
And is there I'm going to mess this word, reciprocity in
Yeah.
it, right? Because, and it's not an exchange of money. It's just it's, I
An
would say,
energy.
an energy exchange,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes that is money, because money is energy, but sometimes it's just an energy exchange. And
Mhm.
I find that, for me, it's sometimes like not having those boundaries, but kind of like what you said is like, by putting some of these processes in place, it's helped me to stay within my scope and understanding what's out of scope or when I'm pushing limits. And then at that point, it's like, I have to ask myself the question, if you do this, are you going to, is there going to be, like you said, is there going to be an assumption or a judgment that it's coming back to you another way? And if you make that assumption, and it doesn't go that way, are you going to be disappointed? If the answer is yes, then you stay within your scope. If the answer is no, because you feel that this is right and this is what you feel in your heart you need to do, and it doesn't matter any outcome, then that probably feels right to proceed. How would you feel about that? Like, how about you? How does it show up for you?
Yeah, I think that that's a good way to frame it. I think that the way that I sometimes will say that is um, the difference between over giving and giving out of abundance. Like action wise, they're pretty similar, right? But where I'm pulling those resources from are different. If I'm coming from a place of abundance and I'm giving, then that naturally means I have over abundance of resources. Whereas if I'm over giving or overextending, then I'm coming from a depleted state,
Mm.
and that's where I think it can get imbalanced. I think that something that somebody that I was having a really great conversation with, maybe was it last year, sometime recently, in the last year or so, talking about when we overgive, at first, people are sometimes surprised and delighted. And then that's if you continue to overgive to the same person or entity, then it becomes normalized or expected. And then that assumption, right? The entitlement, right? Then they start to
Mm-hmm.
feel entitled sometimes to it when we don't have those boundaries and we just
Mm-hmm.
continue to overgive. And then that leads to our own resentment, right?
Yeah, no,
So I
absolutely.
think that like not listening to I think that how that shows up for me is when I'm not honoring listening to myself, right? Sometimes I will know that I'm overextending, or I will feel pressure from scarcity. I don't want to upset this. I think that that's connected to people pleasing, right? And um, again, the same thing between am I coming from a place of abundance or am I people pleasing? Same kind of gut check, right? It's like, am I doing this because I'm scared of something? And if so, then it's probably people pleasing, right? I'm
Mhm.
scared of upsetting them. I'm scared of losing a client. I'm scared of losing money. I'm scared, whatever it is. If fear is driving it, it's probably people pleasing.
Mm.
And then if it's something else driving it, then you can go, oh, okay, that's all right. I can come from that place. But that's been an easier way for me to kind of quickly gut check that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think too is I had a really interesting situation happen with a client that I'm now working with and she's unbelievable. And it was very early on we did a project for 30 days and now we're going to be working with each other for the rest of the year, which I'm so thankful for.
Cool.
She's just an amazing human. But early on in the conversation, I had said something and she heard some doubt and she's like, I wouldn't actually be talking to you right now if I didn't think you were capable of it. And I think sometimes when we're in this driver's seat, our clients may not understand that sometimes we need that reassurance because maybe, we have a story. Maybe there are people that we've worked with in the past and, that place of doubt had nothing to do with her. That place of doubt had something to do with something that was years and years ago. And yet, but I felt myself going there, but by her calling me out, and I loved that. Like,
Yeah.
I knew it was a great fit because, you know, as a consultant and when we're sitting in these fractional,
Yeah.
COO roles,
Yeah.
it's very easy for them to think we have all the answers. But it's like, I think that's the beauty of when we're working with impact driven leaders is that
Mhm.
when they speak up like that and call us, we're also getting better too. And that was just like one example that I'm just so thankful for this amazing human to
Yeah.
it kind of started to erase some of the things I kept telling myself.
Mhm. That's good. I like when we are. I mean, that's why it's important to me. It's what I sort of say. I like when we're surrounding ourselves with people who will do that, and I think that that is why it's been so important for me. Like, I'm just very intentional about who I put in my world, and that comes down to even my clients. Like, sometimes people ask me, like, oh, what industries do you work with? And I say, I'm industry agnostic. And I think that sometimes that will get an eye roll or like okay, she thinks she can work with anybody. And it's really like I go on to explain, there are some parameters of like sizes and mostly service-based business, whatever. But what I really get at is I'm industry agnostic. What I care about is being mission, vision, and values aligned. I learned the hard way working with people that I wasn't in alignment with, and I just couldn't in good conscience help them build. I was like, this is ick. Like, I can't. Like, I fired clients because of it. And it was hard decisions to make. But I think that when we are more and more intentional about surrounding ourselves with people who value that like honesty and like loving, like radical candor, right? Like
Oh yeah.
speaking the truth kindly and directly, it can make all the difference. And so I think, yeah, it just excites me when I hear stories like that.
No, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious too, like, so thrive differently. I know that you've mentioned a couple different ways that you work with clients. What are the ways, like, who do you love working with, and what lights you up about the ways that you work with people?
Yeah. I mean, I've been fortunate enough in my career, both in my own business and just in the businesses that I've worked for and with, of kind of sitting in this second in command seat, and there's a lot of different words for it. The most common one for entrepreneurs is the integrator, which is kind of where I sit. So that's through traction, and it's called the EOS model. But actually, what I would love to call it is a first follower. And that's something, we were talking earlier, like, what are you trying to roll out? And, first follower is kind of the thing I want to roll out of, like, what does it mean to be a first follower? And you were talking about it before, is like, it's the person who sees the vision of the visionary and is the first one to follow them and shows everybody else how to get behind that as a movement.
Yeah.
If one thing that I would love to do in the next few years is make this a new movement and stop calling it a CMO, a chief marketing officer, but a chief movement officer. because I think it just changes the feeling around it. But the people I love to work with, if it's on a project basis, it's usually helping them to create their story. And, there's a lot of tools, obviously, with ChatGPT and, all AI. There's a lot of things that exist, but a lot of times it doesn't sound like us, or it doesn't, um, it doesn't pick up on the things that are so important to connect with the audience. I think that these tools are amazing. And so I help, um, my clients really create a custom voice for them. And it's not based on their business, is based on them and who they are. And so when you take this document that I create for them as an asset, you can put it right back into ChatGPT and create a lot of copy, which still needs to be edited, but it actually sounds exactly like you. The other type of people I really love to work with, are, entrepreneurs who have figured out a way to get to the, mid to high 6-figure mark and are really trying to understand what it's like to get to that 7+ figure mark. And that's usually where, I find the best, whereas that if they have a team working with them, and I sit in not as, a direct report, but as this dotted line to the organization, and looking at all the different, types of, things that they currently have and what could be needed, and helping them to build out, their strategy for the next 3 to 10 years. And then I reverse engineer it from there. So those are, the type of people. Now, as far as industry is concerned, I'm also industry agnostic. I do love to work with anything around women's health. I love to work with therapists. I love to work with, it's more heart driven. It's about who you serve. I love to work with organizations that want to create a nonprofit arm. That to me is really amazing. But other than that, I mean, it's really, like you said, it's about the connection and, the impact that they want their business as the vessel to create in the world. And I think if we can start having, if we have that type of conversation, then it would be in alignment.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I just, while you were talking, I pulled up on the screen so that in case people were interested in connecting with you, learning more about what you do, or connecting with you directly, thrivedifferently.com. And then there's a contact or connect. I don't remember which it is. Yes, it's very easy.
It's not updated because that's one of the things that I do for my clients is I help build out their website through their stories. But, like you said, when we do all these things for other clients, we do a lot of stuff that we tell our clients to do that we don't do ourselves. So our website is not completely updated, but I can be contacted there for sure.
I love it. Is there anywhere else that you would love for people to connect with you or contact you? Are you on any socials that you would want to direct people to? It's okay if not. I just want to make sure.
I mean, for sure. I mean, LinkedIn is always a great one. LinkedIn is just Nicole Aquila, and, you could always Instagram me. I don't post a lot, but I do, love to connect. But yeah, Nicole, you can always just send me an email too, Nicole@thrivedifferently.com, because for me, it's about having a conversation. And, some of the stuff that, because I do so much in the marketing / movement world that I'm helping with my clients, that means I don't really like to do it for myself. I like it to do it for them. So,
Yeah. I remember earlier you were saying something about something you're doing on Thursdays to be available or open to people. And I don't remember what.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So I'm part of this amazing community. This amazing human, Portia, who actually I also met at an Arizona event. She created this group, and it's called the Support Squad, and we have business cousins. So we all offer office hours. So if people are interested, there's people from all different types of industries. And so it's basically us supporting each other and supporting each other's clients. And so I do have office hours the last Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. Central Time. So I do have one this Thursday. So if someone was interested, you can shoot me an email and I can set you up. It's an Eventbrite, but I'd have to give a code for people to not have to pay for it. So
nice. So what is that time used for? I generally get a sense that it sounds like questions or support around your expertise for this collective of humans, and then people that are connected to them.
No, absolutely. So when people come to me and they just ask, basically all things scaling and marketing. So, how do you, if they're what I love about the community is it's people and different entrepreneurs that are at different stages of their business. So you could be meeting with someone who's never started a business but are about to launch a book, to someone who's running a 7-figure business. And it's just a really welcoming, inclusive community of people of all the beautiful colors and genders. And I love it so much. But yeah, people just come and, really they just ask questions about, marketing. They ask questions about how to use ChatGPT to sound, more authentic, how to use what's the best way to use their website? How do they create a strategy that feels good to them? How do they come up with goals and numbers, whatever it may be. So, and then really for me, I love just to meet people. So if people are interested, just come and have a chat, because that leads to another chat.
Is that like a group office hours then? Or is it like people are popping in and out? I'm asking, so I'm so nosy.
No, yeah, for sure. So each of us individually have our own office hours, and then there are times where we'll connect as the group. So the support squad are actually the business owners, and then the business cousins are the people who are our clients. So the support squad have meetings where we'll all meet, but then our office hours, we also use them too, and we'll show up to each other's office hours. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, so Thursdays are just me. So it's just for people to come ask me really anything they want to know.
I was going to say, it sounds almost, it sounded like an ask me anything kind of.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've just briefly touched on it, but there's so many aspects to marketing. And that's kind of the unique part about our business, because my fiance and partner in the business does, Google and SEO. So a lot of times people are having questions about, social and Google and SEO and how to be found. And so I could help for people to understand, what does it mean? And it does mean something based on your budget and what your goals are. If you're looking for one-to-many versus one-to-one, that's a very different thing, right? So how do you navigate that? Because I think with entrepreneurs, there's so many different tools out there, and there are so many different things that we actually like doing or dislike doing. And I do not believe in one formula, which is another thing that you and I agree with, is it has to be unique to the person, because if they don't want to do it or don't like doing it, they're not. Let's find a better way.
Yep,
So,
exactly. Yeah. Well, I think that, a question floated in and out of my brain. Come back to me, question.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah.
Question time.
So you kind of talked a little bit about the spherical listening, but I want to hear kind of, you popped up some words, but can you kind of give me a brief overview of the spherical listening and what you're going to be helping people learn?
So spherical listening has, in addition, as I mentioned earlier, to the primary ways that people listen is to respond and to learn. And then there are 5 other elements of spherical listening, and being able to train ourselves to show up and listen in those kind of ways. So one that I didn't pop up on the screen yet is attune, which is empathy listening. And I'm getting an attunement with who you are and what's going on. And you talked about that earlier. I just didn't pop that up there. I'm also playing around. I was working on languaging around it too. I used to just call it empathetic listening, and I was going for all A's, and I got 3 of the 5 that have A's. And so, in terms of branding for spherical listening, it's still a work in progress, but the tools are solid. So one of the other ones we talked about was alignment, which is, maybe we didn't talk about alignment. This is goal, or getting yourself on the same team and working towards the same goal. And this is especially helpful when you feel like either there is a project-based thing and there's a goal orientation, or you feel at odds and you're working on the readjustment of, we're on the same team, we want the same thing, and I'm getting aligned to solve for the problem. You're not the problem, the issue is the problem, right? So, and then the assumptions that we talked about, checking our assumptions, possibility, opportunity listening. This is especially useful from a sales point of view, or a mission advancement point of view, where might there be new opportunities or ideas that other people haven't thought of, but because of what you're picking up on when you're listening, you have those ahas. And then the other one is presence, or just holding space, and that people really sometimes needing to be witnessed, or feel safe to open up. And again, you actually touched on that when you were talking about your 3 hours of interviewing. And I think that like it can feel really vulnerable, especially as a leader, as a founder. There's so much that you're holding, and you are having to show up simultaneously as a leader, and you're this creator. And so there's vulnerability in being a creator, right? And so sometimes it's scary to open up or share about the things that are not working, or that you're not sure how to make them happen. And so that's part of it, the way it shows up in my work. But really, from a just like global, like listening tools, like really being able to say, I'm here to witness you and support you without there being any other agenda. And that's the presence piece. And I think that what is important and what I'll be working on is, how do we drop into those different kinds of listening? What are the ways to help prepare ourselves for that, or catch that we're listening in one way and shift into another kind of way of listening? And how to be listening for the kinds of responses that cue us either with the right questions or cue us into a different kind of listening in the same conversation, right? So usually, especially when you're doing this really like authentic, like full bodied leadership listening, I think that you're shifting which of those that you're kind of leading with at any given time. You may start a conversation with prepping yourself for checking assumptions, but you don't come into the conversation with that. You come in with presence and say, what are the questions I'm going to ask to hold space for somebody? And then how am I going to actually do that? When do I have enough information in that conversation to safely and comfortably shift into that assumption checking, or into that alignment kind of listening and questioning? Does that make sense?
No, it does. It definitely makes me like, do you have like any type of, besides of course what you're going to be teaching everyone in the workshop, but do you have like a tool that you use, or like that helps you to transition, or a way that you categorize it?
I think that yes, the short answer is, especially if it's a conversation that you know you're going into that's an important conversation, I have an important conversation workbook or checklist, and asking yourself, even when I try to distill it down, when you're going into an important conversation, asking yourself, what is it that I want them, what do I want the other person to leave feeling, knowing, and what do I want them to do? And if I want to make sure that I have answers to those 3 things, and what is the next step for us both if I get what I want, and what is the next step for us both if we can't get in alignment with that, right? So I think about the answers to all of that going into an important conversation if I have time to prep. And then what was the part you said, how do I know, or what are the ways to know how to shift?
Yeah, or even like, if there's any type of, the reason why I asked that is like, even when I'm doing like when I'm doing my interview for the story session, and it's similar but very different. So I was intrigued. Like, I have different things that I'm looking to kind of, not necessarily in the conversation, but after the conversation, when I'm putting it back together, it's like, what are things that are truly about their story? What are things about their uniqueness? What are things, are there certain phrases that they say over and over again? So I didn't know if there's like any like, little nuggets that you're picking up as you go through these.
Yeah. I think that for me, I'm listening to some of the paralanguage things. So, like you were talking about earlier, what is the tone of voice? What's the body language? What's the facial expressions? What's not being said? What would I have expected them to say that they have avoided saying? Some of it is that hesitation before they speak, or the question mark at the end of a thought, and not letting that pass by. Usually when I pick up on one of those like paralanguage things, that is one of those cues to me that I may need to shift into a different kind of listening and questioning. So if I'm working on like alignment and goals, and I am like asking a question about how do we feel about that? Are we ready to move forward? And I hear hesitation in their voice, or they pause, or their language is wishy-washy. Any of that, I will take a step back and name that. And I think that that can be scary and challenging, I think, but just to say, hey, I noticed when you said that, you paused. Can you tell me more about that?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm tuning in and listening in a different way. I'm listening for like, now I've made an assumption that something's wrong. Now I'm validating, am I right about that assumption or not? Right now I'm
Yeah.
listening in a different way. Because like you said, sometimes it's about the thing, and sometimes it's about I'm hungry and I'm distracted and I'm not sure if that's going to fit in before my lunch break, right? Whatever.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So I think that that's one example. Same thing with when somebody, I'm listening for future oriented language, or missed opportunity language, when I'm thinking about possibility. Like, where are they thinking small, or where are they thinking big, and they haven't connected the dot from this to this. So that's really what I'm tuning into. I think my brain just naturally kind of, that's one of my default ways of listening is possibility or opportunity. That's what I think makes me good at connecting with people, good at process, and good at sales. Is I'm just like, because I'm listening for those authentic opportunities, right? Like, I'm not trying to be slimy and fit somebody into a box. I go, oh, if we connect this to this, that would work in this kind of way. Now I see the possibility. I've heard that. Let me check that assumption. Let me shift into that kind of listening, right?
Yeah, no, that actually reminds me of a conversation I had recently, but I would love to hear, do you have a specific example of maybe where you saw hesitation and like how you use this process to maybe come to a resolution, or not even resolution, but to further along the conversation in some way?
Yeah, let me see. I'm sure there are lots of examples. I'm trying to think of one specific enough to share right now. I think that like even just like the one that's coming to mind, and I was like, should I share that? Sure. But I mean, even just like with the client work that I do, right? A lot of what I'm working with, especially when I'm in that fractional COO seat, is getting a lot of approvals to move forward with plans, right? And really tuning in to, is it a full body yes? Is it an enthusiastic yes or not? And I think that there's been plenty of times that I've been able to catch that there is a problem or a concern or a fear that one of my clients has had, because I've heard them have that question mark at the end. Yeah, I think that's fine. And I go, that doesn't sound like it's fine. Tell me more about that. And then they go, well, I'm afraid of this, or I'm just not sure of that. And then I can either help soothe whatever that fear is, or go, oh, that's a really valid point. What about this option instead? And we can pivot to a better solution. That's still not a very specific example, I realize, because it was a client one, and I was just trying to be mindful of like sharing people's private business. Man, I wish I could think of a more specific one. Yeah. Uh, I'll share this. The summer that we met, we were at a large conference, and the leader of that conference was sharing about his vision and what he wanted to see for the world and who he wanted to call in. And what I was hearing that whole time was what was not being said, what he was not owning for himself in a way that he deserved to own. And that I think either like humility or fear or whatever was coming up for him. And I decided, because the structure of this kind of conference was that like, or event, was that there were mics that people could go up to. And I decided to go up and lovingly, like, show some radical candor to say, own this. You deserve to own this, right? And I think that that's an example of really tuning into what was not being said, and reflecting that back in a powerful way so that not only he could feel appreciated and valued in a way that I don't think he felt seen, and then the whole room showing him that we all saw him that way.
Well, I take that one step further.
Yeah.
Because I watched this event go down, and the way you, I'm going to say, violently showed love and I see you was one of the most profound moments that I've ever witnessed at a conference. And not only did it make me feel differently about this incredible man, but it made me feel like these are the incredible people, and it made you, I knew you needed to be in my world. And this is before we even met.
Yeah.
I didn't meet you, but
Yeah,
I
we hadn't met yet.
remembered you because that's the type of person I want in my world, who can reflect back things that, you know, you may not be able to see. And I think that is the gift that you have. But for someone to have the bravery and to show the love like that in such a public setting, I think spoke volumes, not just to, you know, the place that we were in, but the person that you are and the way that you treat anyone who's in your circle. Because I was going to meet you, whether in some way, fashion, or form. If it was stalking, that was fine. Because as soon as this cute little pixie ends up coming up to the mic with her blue hair and barrettes of butterflies, I knew that you needed to be in my world. So I think sometimes, you know, and that's to me also the first follower thing, is when you see things that others may not see in themselves, it's that bravery to step up and say, I freaking see you. Everybody else see you too. And I think that is the movement piece that I knew. Well, just it's who you are. It's who you are. And that's why I adore you. So, and
That
not just for that, but for so many other things. That was an amazing situation. Amazing situation.
Thank you. I just realized that you saying that reminded me that when I was earlier, I was like, there's a thought, a question, it floated away. That's what you helped bring it back. And this shared passion and love for a changed world that you and I have, and the vision. So do you feel comfortable? Like, what is the world? Like, what is your, like, utopia? What is the vision that you have for the world?
Gosh, man. What is the vision?
No pressure.
Yeah, I mean, small question. It's fine. We got this. Gosh.
Or what draws you to, like, when you know that somebody, I'll give you a little bit, I'll get you off that a little bit. Like, when do you know you're aligned? Like, even if even if somebody's not meant to be a client, like, how do you know this is my person and they need to be in my world? Like, because I feel like it's connected to this vision piece. That's why I'm reframing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, that helped me a little bit more. I think I know that someone's going to be my world, whether they're a client or whatever, when we talk about impact. When you talk about, and it's not just with your business, but anything, if you're talking about how you can serve, that is like, it doesn't matter. There never has to be an exchange of money for me to know that you're going to be my world. Like, I don't pay for my friends. I choose them, right? But I think but when I find that when people are throwing dollars and cents in your face, I know that you're not aligned with me, because to me, wealth is the byproduct of impact and not the other way around. So I think but yet I do believe that wealth can help with creating more impact. And so, but if we start a conversation and it's about, you want to tell me everything that you do and how you serve and your rates and how fast your business has grown, it's probably not going to be a good fit. But if you want to talk about the people that you've met, the tears that you've shared, the hands that you've held, the hugs that you've given, the foundations you've contributed to, let's have a talk. because now now we're talking about creating a better world. And I think that's the thing, is like each of us, if business was led from that, of what impact can I make versus how many dollars, first of all, the dollars would be a lot more.
Right.
Second of all, the world would be a lot better. So I kind of skated around your answer, but
That's okay.
that's the way I view it. But I think it also comes to how you have a conversation and what, and you're nailing it. Like,
Well, I feel like for me, like that's why I work with businesses, because I believe when business is done right, and that's the key part, right? When business is done right and can be one of the most powerful agents of positive change that we have in the world.
100%.
And I recognize that there are a lot of examples of businesses that are working on an extraction-based model that is taking and draining the world, and that's not business done right. And it doesn't have to be like that. But I believe when you are building a business for impact and understanding, that's why, like, one of the other things I say when I'm talking about who do I work with, I don't necessarily care if somebody's business is like social justice, social change driven. I care that they understand that their business has an impact in the world and that they care about that being a positive impact. And they're thinking about all of their stakeholders, not just shareholders. And or most of the time I'm working with, owner founders who don't necessarily have other shareholders besides themselves, or it's really, small. They're not publicly owned companies or something, but thinking about how is this affecting everyone that my business touches. And that's really, earlier you mentioned EOS, integrator, traction, and you and I have had several private conversations, many private conversations about what is beautiful about that structure and what is missing. And that's why I've been so excited about creating the framework that we use with Quinovate, which is our systems DNA framework, which I believe helps fill in those gaps that are missing in traction. But I think that what you were saying earlier too, about you want to move away from CMO being chief marketing officer to chief movement officer. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that's so aligned with our systems DNA model and our core care systems for business, where rearranging where like what we call our attraction systems, which is our messaging and our branding and our marketing, all of those different pieces, right? Sales, recruitment, anything that's bringing people in. Inside the systems DNA model, we call that our collective advancement. So because it is bringing people around a shared mission and collectively advancing that vision and mission in the world. And so now it's no longer about marketing and sales. It's about a movement or about the mission, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just meant to share that with you earlier and I forgot.
Yes. So yes, the alignment is there, everyone.
It's so true. I know I could talk to you literally all day. And I recognize that we've been talking for over an hour. So we should probably wrap up. I know we both have very full plates, but I'm always so excited to sit down and talk about the world and the ways that we want to make a difference in the world. So I appreciate you so much. And thank you for taking time to chat with me.
Oh my gosh, this is awesome. I appreciate it. I love talking to you, and the fact that we can actually capture it is pretty cool.
Right?
But yeah, the conversations never end. And I think, there's obviously a mutual love here and respect. And I'm just so thankful for you and for this time.
I'm thankful for you too. And then just in case somebody makes it all the way into 1 hour and 8 minutes or whatever the case might be, again, connecting with Nicole right there, thrivedifferently.com. If you're interested in the spherical listening workshops, you can go to quinovate360.com/listen. Quinovate360.com is also just where you can learn more about what I do and what we are doing in the world at Quinovate. So thank you so much, Nicole. Is there any last things that we want to share with the world before we wrap up for today? Any last bits of brilliance you want to drop?
Oh man, I don't know. Just go slay it. And we love you guys. Like, that's it. That's all I got. Like, just keep the vibes going, positive vibes. I don't know.
No, that's perfect. Keep the vibes going. I think that's a perfect way to end. Thanks, Nicole.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.